All right, so now we're going to talk about discrete distributions. So this was chapter 5. So let's say we want to invest $1,000 into a corporate bond fund or in a common stock fund. The following table represents the annual return per $1,000 of each of these investments under various economic conditions and the probability that each of those economic conditions will occur. Okay, so we've got some probabilities, some economic conditions. We've got corporate bond funds with the expected outcome. We've got common stock funds with those returns. I shouldn't say expected outcome. I should say the annual returns under different economic conditions. And I'm just going to call this column X and this column Y. Okay, so what is the expected return and standard deviation for the corporate bond fund? Well, let's just recall some of our formulas. Remember that the expected value of x is equal to the sum of every x value multiplied by its corresponding probability, p of x. So let me start with the expectation of x. So it's equal to every value times its corresponding probability, and we're going to add all of those up. Okay, so let's do that. Let's do equals. So I want to take every x value in this column and multiply it by its corresponding probability and add them. So let's start with the first one. If we want to multiply negative 300 times its probability, 0.01, plus negative 70 times its corresponding probability, 0.09, plus 30 times its probability, 0.15, plus 60 times its probability, 0.35, plus 100 times its probability of 0.3, plus 120 times its probability, 0.1. Enter. Okay, so our expected value is 58.2. That is our expected return per $1,000 if we invest in a corporate bond fund. So now we want to calculate the standard deviation. We're being asked about the standard deviation. Well, recall that the standard deviation right here is the square root of the variance. So this little symbol right here is the square root. And the variance is equal to the expected value of x squared minus the expectation of x squared, where the expectation of x squared is the sum of x squared times p of x. Okay, so we kind of need to take this step by step. So let's start with this. Let's start with the expectation of x squared. So let me start with expectation of x. And actually, if you'll recall, this is Excel is kind of annoying, so I'm going to just superscript it. You don't really need to do this. Okay, expectation of x squared. So if you want to do that, I had to right click, go to format cells, and then do superscript. It's pretty finicky. It's honestly pretty annoying. But if you want to make it look pretty, go ahead and play with that. Okay, but we want to do the same thing as this formula. It's just instead of using these values, we want to square these values. So here's what I'm going to do. Let's click on our expectation of x value. Let's come up here to the top, and let's highlight all of this. Right click, copy. Now click your escape key in the top left portion of your keyboard. And now click down here, click paste. Okay, so now we have the formula written here. So let's make sure we're in this cell, Excel D19. Let's come up here to the top again. Okay, we want to take all of our E values and square them. So all I'm gonna do, so for E9, that's my negative 300 here. I'm just gonna write caret 2. And actually, I should wrap this in parentheses to make sure that there aren't any issues. And I'm just going to do that for all of our e values because these are our x values that we want to square. So I'm going to wrap e10 in parentheses, and I'm going to square that value. And then go over again. I'm going to take e11, and I'm going to square it. And then I'm going to go to e12, and I'm going to square it. e13, square it, oops, and exited a little too early, and then e14, and squared. Okay, so I have my expectation of x squared. So now let's worry about variance. So recall, this is our variance. We're going to take this cell and then subtract off this squared. So let's do the variance of x. So let's write this as equals. So we want to take expectation of x squared, right? So we're going to take this cell right here, and then we're going to subtract our expectation, so this 58.2, but then we need to square that value. So I'm going to do caret 2, and then I'm going to hit enter. And now we have our variance. Now we can calculate our standard deviation of x, which is just going to be equals, I'm going to say square root, so SQRT, and then I'm going to click on variance. Close parenthesis, enter. Okay, and we have our standard deviation. So just recall that this is SQRT. Okay, so what is the expected return and standard deviation for the common stock funds? Now we want to do it for this column, which we're now going to just call Y. So the process is the same, we just want to be using this column instead of this column. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this down. So let me do copy, paste. I'm going to delete those, and then I'm going to switch out X for Y. Okay, so the expectation of X. So again, I don't really want to type all of that out again, so how about I just go up to expectation of X, come up here to the toolbar, right click, copy, click the escape key, click on this cell, D24, come back up to the toolbar, formula bar, right click, paste. Okay, but now instead of using E, we want to use F. We want column F instead of column E. So let's go ahead and let's change all of these E's to F's. So I'm just going to go over everywhere I see an E, I'm going to make an F. And then once I've done all of that, I hit enter. Okay, and now I'm going to do the same thing for expected value of x squared. So I'm going to click on this cell, come up to the formula bar, highlight it, right click, copy, click the escape key, come down to expectation of y, now come back up to the formula bar, right click, paste, and then I'm going to do the exact same thing. Everywhere I see an E, I'm going to put an F. And then click enter. Okay, so now we're ready for the variance. So we're going to do equals expectation of y squared minus the expectation of y which is this cell, and then we have to square that value, so squared. And now we can find the standard deviation, so equals SQRT. And also, whenever, I should have said this a while ago, equals SQR. So notice that it's popping up right here. So if you just hit the tab button, it'll automatically fill out that formula. And now I'm going to click on the variance, close parenthesis, and enter. All right, now we're ready for number 3. Which investment option would you choose and why? Okay, well, let's look at the expected return. Well, the expected return for the corporate bond is 58.2, and the expected return for the common stock fund is 63.01. So if we wanted to think about expectation, we could say that the common stock fund is better. So I might say we would likely choose the common stock fund because its expected return is greater. Right, 63 is bigger than 58. However, let's note the standard deviation. Remember, standard deviation is the level of variability in the data. So we should take that into account. What if we are more risk averse? So we might actually think that the return on X is not as great as the return on Y, but it's less variable. It's only 61.6 compared to 195.2. So we might say, however, we might be more inclined to pursue the corporate bond fund because it is not as variable. Because if you add or subtract the standard deviation to this, if you subtract one standard deviation away from the expected value, that's actually a negative outcome. So the second outcome, while it has a higher expected value, it has a much greater downside risk, but it also has a bigger upside risk. And this one is just a safer option. So it's kind of up to however the individual wants to invest.